It's about minus 23 degrees Celsius, and I've decided that I would like to start the new year sleeping out, which always makes me happy and makes me feel better. Normally what I would do for winter camping is I would load up a couple of sleeping bags and a ground sheet and a tarp and spend the night out that way. Or build a quincy, a snow shelter, by piling up some snow. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. You can get it up to about 0 degrees in a quincy, which is pretty nice, especially if it's minus 40 out. But it takes some time to build, and you can get quite wet building them. So you usually need to bring around some extra clothes just to keep yourself from going hypothermic from the moisture. It's a bit harder to dry out your clothes as well. You have to dry them out outside of the shelter around a fire, and there's not much by way of heat source inside the shelter. So you're usually bringing a good ground sheet and a sleeping bag or two inside the quincy as well. With the tarp, really easy to do, really easy to make, particularly if you're in dry winter conditions like we are here in the Yukon. But you're lugging around a couple of sleeping bags on a ground sheet, and normally what that means for me in the winter is I'm pulling a poke along with me, which if you're snowshoeing through thick brush can be a bit of a pain. So what I'm doing today is a third option, and that's a Supershelter. Now, I understand that the Supershelter might have been engineered or developed by Mors Kochanski, and I have slept in a Supershelter before, and it's quite warm. In fact, you can get it, even at minus 30, you can get it easily up to 15, 16 degrees, maybe even more Celsius. And all you need for it is a tarp, about a medium weight painter's tarp, a bit of string or paracord, and a good saw, foldable saw. And so that's what we're doing tonight. I'm sleeping in my shelter. I'll finish assembling it, and then I'll give you a little tour of what the shelter looks like, how I made it, why I made it the way that I did, and then later tonight I'll give you an inside tour of the shelter. But for now, while I've got some daylight because the sun sets early here this time of year, I've got a bit of work to do and a bit of firewood to harvest. So I've got a few more things that I need to do before the sun sets for the day. And I figured that while we have a bit of light, I might as well give you a bit of a tour of the camp. So over here we have my log piles that I'm accumulating. A general rule of thumb for using this type of shelter in the winter is get way more wood than you think you'll need. You'll never regret having more wood, but you'll definitely regret not having enough. So I've been working away, hauling wood, taking my time, because the first rule of being out in the winter, on the land in the winter and winter camping, is do not work up a sweat. You work up a sweat, you get hypothermia that can kill you. It can be one of the worst things to happen. So I was starting to sweat, so I've stopped, let myself cool off. I'll give you the tour. The main thing is take it easy, work slowly, work carefully, because if you don't, one small thing can really lay you up. And I'll show you an example of one of those small things. If you look here on the top of the shelter, you'll see some sticks. These are basically clothespins that I've made to fasten my painter's tarp to my regular tarp. And that just holds them together and creates a little bit of a seal. So as I was cutting the pegs, I was using my knife to slice down into the pegs, and basically holding the peg with one hand and cutting with the other. Well, one of the pegs cut quicker than I expected, and I sliced my thumb. And that, of course, meant that I spent the rest of the afternoon having to wrap my thumb and manage the bleeding, and mostly working with one hand. There was definitely a safer, better way that I could have done that, and later on did, which was to put the pegs on a harder surface and gently baton or tap the blade into the pegs, which is what I did later. But again, an example of how a small thing can have a bigger impact, particularly when you're winter camping. It's a lot more difficult to to keep your hand warm as well when you're trying to stop the bleeding. You can't just stuff it into your glove or your mitt, because then you're just going to soak your glove or mitt with blood. And that was a small thing that became a bigger thing that I had to manage. So here I am with my kids preparing the site. I believe it's important to teach my kids these skills not just in case they ever need them, but it's also part of developing their own personal resilience and comfort on the land. The genius of this shelter is that it is using multiple thermodynamic principles to keep you warm inside. So one of them is it uses the sheet for the infrared heat from the fire. It traps the radiation heat from the fire. The bed is raised off the ground, and we'll come around here. And if you look inside the shelter here, we have spruce boughs laid out across a bunch of other spruce. And what this does is it allows for convection. So at the bottom of the shelter, there are some larger logs here around the back of it. And what happens is once I build that fire up, the heat that comes in, it convects up through the spruce boughs to keep my body warm. Eventually those logs, the big logs there, will absorb some of that heat and then create a bit of thermal mass, further helping to keep me warm in the shelter. And you'll see here, I'm trying a bit of an experiment tonight. This tarp that I'm using has a silver side, and I'm wondering if that will reflect some of the heat onto my back. If it doesn't, the way that I was originally taught the shelter is to use an emergency blanket as a way of reflecting that heat. And so I'll give that a try. These sticks here that are holding up my tarp, not ideal because they can poke a hole in your tarp, especially if it gets windy. And also I want to make sure that that angle's right so the heat is reflecting down on me properly. So I'll modify that later probably. Not such a big deal when it's calm like it is now, but definitely a big deal later on if it gets windy. Speaking of wind, when you're building this kind of shelter, ideally what you want is for the wind to be coming along the face of the shelter, not blowing into it, not blowing away from it, because that'll suck all kinds of sparks into your shelter. And you'll see, because I was out here with my kids the other day, you'll see that there are some holes in the shelter, and these are mostly from sparks. Some are from tearing on sticks, but mostly from sparks. That's not the end of the day. It's not going to wreck my shelter. Yes, I suppose in theory I could patch them up with tape, but there's really no need to do that. The shelter will work just fine without it. You'll see tonight, I'll show you that when I'm in the shelter or when I have the fire going, that this painter's tarp will billow out. And that's exactly what you want, that warm air inside expanding. It'll push this painter's tarp out, and that's how you know it's working. It of course works better if you get a good seal. So you want to make sure that around your shelter that you've done a good job getting a seal. I have a bit of a gap here. I'll figure out what to do about that because I don't want to lose all my heat out the top there. And then around here, I'll just let gravity mostly do the work here. But we'll see how it goes and tweak and experiment with it tonight. So I have more wood to collect. Then I'll get my fire going, boil up a nice cup of tea, and as the sun sets, I'll turn in for the night. Welcome inside the super shelter. I've just crawled in. You can see I've got a big fire roaring out there. And see how the plastic is bulging outward? This is perfect. It means I'm retaining heat and the air inside is warming up, and I know the air inside is warming up because I'm gonna have to shed a layer soon. The icicles from my mustache are melting pretty quickly, so it's gonna be nice and warm and cozy in here. I've got an ample supply of firewood. So a lot of pros on this shelter. One is if you really need to warm somebody or something up, especially for a more protracted period of time, the shelter will do the trick for sure, because you can get it, as I say, I mean, at least 15 degrees, even if it's minus 30 out. At least that's been my experience. There's some cons to the shelter as well. It takes a bit of practice. It can be a little bit fiddly. You are creating a bit of waste, like this plastic I mean, I'll use it again, for sure I'll use it again. And I suppose I can patch it up with little bits of tape, but over time I'm using plastic, and not necessarily ideal. It does take a little while to build the shelter. You definitely have to use a bunch of wood that's around. And if you're in an area without a lot of wood, that's not really an option. Or if you're in an area with not a lot of wood that you're able to use for whatever reason, then it's not an option. For me though, I live in the Yukon, and in particular in a part of the Yukon where it's been heavily hit by spruce beetles, and I'm in a firewood harvest area is where I've set up this camp. So basically anything that I've cut down was either going to be cut down for firewood or fire smarted at some point in the future as not quite a fire break, but as a fire mitigation measure, because that's always a concern in communities surrounded by the boreal forest, and where I live, Kokata Haines Junction, everybody's been taking that pretty seriously and doing the work to mitigate that. So that's why in the area that I'm in, I've gone and harvested the wood that I have, because I know that it's going to get harvested and burned as fuel wood anyways, and I generally want to leave as small an impact on the land as I can. The towing some sleeping bags and a pulk has, I would say, the least impact, along with a quincy. But if you need something warmer because somebody's going hypothermic or whatever, then the Supershelter does a good trick. I'll sleep out here tonight. As you can see, no sleeping bags. I'm going to be quite cozy in here. Things are definitely warming up, and yeah, I'll update you as we go. So another one of the challenges with the Supershelter is that it can be a little bit finicky to be really effective, to get really warm inside. You have to try to seal up all the air gaps, so if you don't get a good seal all the way around, you're going to get a cold draft coming through, and you'll really notice it. So you get that cold draft up your back or whatever. But to really build up the heat inside, if you seal off all of those, and it can take a little while to hunt them down and modify the shelter and do little tweaks, but once you get it, it's nice and warm. So I'm cooking right now. I've just stoked up the fire, and oh wow, now it's really stoked, and I can really feel the heat coming through right now. Hopefully that'll warm up a bunch of the logs that I'm on and build up that thermal mass in here. I think that the emergency blanket works better than this shiny tarp material, but I'm not going to bother cracking open an emergency blanket and using that. I'm getting enough heat up my back from this, and I could just rotate in my sleep as we go, so no need to do that. Yeah, not so bad. Very peaceful. I think I'm just going to relax for a bit, lie back, and just listen to the sound of the fire as I drift off to sleep. The wind is picking up and knocking the snow out of the trees. I'm sure the heat from the fire is contributing to that as well. It's 8:30 in the morning. It's good that I had all the wood that I had. Definitely went through a lot of wood last night. the shelter held up well. Once I tracked down the leaks and managed to get those sealed, it was not only was it so warm and cozy, there were times where I was straight up sweating in here. So you can definitely get warm in one of these shelters. I don't think it's something that I would do every time. I miss the sleeping out under a tarp when you can look up and see the sky. It was a bright moon last night, very full moon, with all the clouds in the sky. It lit up the whole sky. It was like walking around in daylight out there. Really beautiful out. Anyways, happy I spent the night, and I'm gonna leave my shelter up because I want to do this again sometime soon.